Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show. All right, guys, we got the fantasy playoff coming up. So, obviously, hopefully week 14 goes well for you guys. I gave you all my must-start players yesterday to make sure that you get the right guys on the field for week 14. But it is also time to start preparing for the fantasy playoffs. So I've got a list here of players that are sneaky league-winning players for the fantasy playoffs, and some of them might be on the waiver wire. Some of them might be on your bench. Maybe you're in a league where you can still trade for players, and I want to encourage you to do whatever it takes to get these guys on your roster. And another thing about these players is you might not want to play them every single week of the fantasy playoffs, but they've got certain matchups where I feel like they can explode, and I want to make sure that you have these guys on your roster and ready to go for those matchups. So I'm going to start right here with the first player on my list, and that's Katon Mitchell. So, obviously, this is a guy that you're going to use to replace somebody who is injured or seriously underperforming if you need a flex, right? So, Katon Mitchell is averaging 9.3 yards per carry in his young NFL career. Now, obviously, very small sample size. He's only carried the ball 29 times, but he's carried the ball 29 times for 269 yards. He's in an offense that scores like crazy and provides him plenty of touchdown upside. I see him absolutely exploding in the back half of the season. He's one of my biggest fantasy playoff sleepers. If he's on the waiver wire, if you can make a trade for him, if you're already savvy enough to have him on your bench, this dude is going to win leagues in the fantasy playoffs. So if you need a flex, this guy's the perfect guy to plug in. I like the majority of his matchups going forward, and I think you could play him multiple weeks throughout the fantasy playoffs, and he could be huge for you. Next player on my list is going to be Romeodobs. Now, Christian Watson absolutely cannot stay on the field, right? So we've got a guy in Christian Watson who continually hurts his hamstring. I don't trust him to ever be on the field. He keeps having that lingering injury to his hamstring, and it just doesn't seem like he's going to be able to consistently stay on the field this year. It's unfortunate for Christian Watson owners, and especially me, because I have a ton of him on Underdog Fantasy. But if you do own Romeodobs, this is actually really good news for you, because when Christian Watson doesn't play, Romeodobs is the guy, and this is an offense that's been clicking. Jordan Love's been on fire. Romeodobs is top 10 in the league in red zone targets, so he's getting fed not only a lot of targets, especially when Christian Watson doesn't play, but he's getting targets within the red zone. That's why he's scoring a lot of touchdowns. This guy's a money play going forward. If you drafted him in best ball, you got great value. This dude is a potential league winner for the fantasy playoffs. So do whatever you can to have him on your roster and ready to go in case you need a flex option for the fantasy playoffs. And I think he might even be good enough to be a wide receiver too if Christian Watson stays hurt. Next player on my list is going to be Gabe Davis. Now with Gabe Davis, what we have to know is that, well, he's obviously not a guy that you're going to play every single week because he can be very inconsistent, but he's also got that really high weekly ceiling where he could come out and give you 25 fantasy points on any given week if it's the right matchup. And if you look at his remaining matchups, the Cowboys, the Chargers, the Patriots, the Dolphins, a lot of these should be relatively high-scoring games, right? Buffalo never really struggles to put points on the board. They take shots downfield. So if they're playing teams that are putting up a lot of points, the Cowboys, the Chargers, the Patriots, the Dolphins, not really the Patriots, but, 3 out of those 4, they're going to be in some shootout games. And those favor Gabe Davis massively. He's definitely playing defenses that can be exploited as far as their secondary. I mean, the Chargers is a great matchup for him. The Dolphins in an inevitable shootout game is a good matchup for Gabe Davis. So you're probably not going to play him every week through the fantasy playoffs, but he's somebody that you definitely want to have on your roster because he's going to come in handy at some point. I'm telling you, and all it takes is 1 week of him being super productive to be a league winner for the fantasy playoffs. So make sure to have this guy on your roster. He's a big-time sleeper for me in the fantasy playoffs, but you've got to know which matchups to play him in because you're not going to play him every single week. Next player on my list is going to be Elijah Moore. Now, this dude had 12 freaking targets, with his new quarterback, Joe Flacco, and they couldn't really connect. I mean, he didn't have as many receptions as he should have had for having 12 targets, right? Only 4 receptions in that last game, but he had, 83 yards. The dude was, very efficient, and I think that Joe Flacco he kind of favors Elijah Moore. I'm not necessarily saying that he favors him over Amari Cooper, but he definitely likes Elijah Moore. And this is kind of the vision I had for Elijah Moore in the offense coming into the season. So it's good to see it kind of come to fruition. I think he's a potential league winner for the fantasy playoffs. If you already have him on your roster, or you can somehow get him through a trade, or he might be on the waiver wire. He's in the waiver wire on a lot of leagues. Go over, pick up Elijah Moore, stash him on your bench for the fantasy playoffs, potential league winner here. Next and final player on my list here is going to be Kyler Murray, my quarterback here. So if you look at Kyler Murray's remaining schedule, the Niners, the Bears, the Eagles, the Seahawks, we have some potential high-scoring games in here. And, he's been on the field for a while, come back from his injury. He's 100%, and he's always going to give you that rushing upside, right? And I think that the Cardinals' offense could be actually decent in the back quarter of the season here. And, we've got some potential high-scoring games here. I mean, they're going to have to pass a lot to keep up with the Niners, even though it's a tough defense. They're going to be bringing the pass rush, as we know. A lot of times that's good for quarterbacks with escapability because, he could get around the edge and potentially bust some huge running plays. If he's getting rushed on every play, he's just going to run the ball and outrun people in the defense. And as fast as their defense is, they can't outrun Kyler Murray. The Bears are a very exploitable defense. The Eagles are an exploitable defense this year against the pass. The Seahawks are an exploitable defense. You get what I'm saying? This is going to be a very good fantasy playoffs for Kyler Murray. So if you're having quarterback issues, I think Kyler Murray could end up being your guy for the fantasy playoffs. All right, guys. Appreciate it. Catch you later.